Okay, so now that we've set up our animator, we want to be able to tell the animator what to do. So let's go back to our project files, and we're going to go into our scripts, and we're going to make some changes to our player controller once again. So we'll open that up here, and we'll need to know what thing we're actually making changes to. So much like before when we had to get the rigid body here, so that we could make, if we go back to our player, so that we could make changes to this rigid body, we wanted this time be able to make changes to the animator here. So we'll go back into our script, and what we're going to say, just like we had here, a private rigid body for my rigid body, what we're going to add in down here now is private animator, and we'll call this my anim. Just keep it nice and short with my anim. And then again, much like we did with the rigid body, in our little start loop function here, we're going to say my anim is equal to get component, and then in the sharp brackets we'll type in animator, so that it's getting the animator component for us, and we'll put our open and close brackets and hit our semicolon. So now it knows as soon as the game starts, it needs to get the animator component on that is already attached to the player, so that it knows what we're going to be making changes to. So now we already know that the velocity of the player is the speed that we're moving. So we know that we can set that to be the speed that we're using back here in our animator. And we also know, of course, that on our is grounded value that we're using to determine whether we're on the ground or not, we already know that's a true or false statement, so we can also just send that straight to the animator. And the way we do both of those things, after all our inputs and stuff have been taken, so that we know that we're as up to date as possible with everything, we're just going to type in here my anim. So that's the animator that we know we've created back up here. So my anim dot set float. So we're setting the float value, which is our speed back here is a float. We know that. So my anim dot set float, and then we open a bracket. And again, if we look at our little tooltip thing down here, we've got a few different options again if we go down through all of them, but we're just using the most basic one, the first one here. So we need a string name, and we need a float value. So our string name, much like we said here when we wanted to use the horizontal axis, we had to use these quotation marks to make it a string. And I'm not sure if I fully explained that at the time or not, but a string is basically just a collection of letters and numbers that make up a string of letters to make a word or a sentence, or it could just be a single standalone thing or anything like that. But in this case, the string we're referring to is the name of the parameter for our float. So that's our speed down here. So again, we want to put a quotation mark, and we want to type in speed and put another quotation mark to close it. And then we'll hit a comma, because we know we have another value that we want to put in. And if we look at our little tooltip, we've got a float value, which is what we want to set as the value of speed here. And we know that what we're talking about is the velocity of the rigid body. Now, the only difference with what we're doing here is, rather than just sending out the velocity of the rigid body, we want to make sure that it's only a positive number, because our move speed, which is what we're setting the speed of the player could be either, what is our move speed we have on the player? We set it to be 5, didn't we? Yes, 5. So the move speed could be either 5, 0, or -5. But back in our animator here, what we've set it up as is, if the speed is greater than 0.1, then we start walking. But if the speed is less than 0.1, we go back to our idle animation. But we don't want our speed to be, if we're moving to the left, our speed is -5. So that's less than 0.1, obviously. So we don't want, when we're moving to the left, our player to be all of a sudden only standing still whenever we move to the left and running whenever we go to the right. So what we want to do back in our script here, rather than just setting out the saying my rigid body dot velocity dot x, which would be the speed of whether we're moving left and right, what we want to do is put in front of that, we want to say matf, which means mat function basically, and we want to say abs, like that. and we put a bracket, and we put another bracket. And so what this, we actually need 2 brackets here just at the end because we want to close the original bracket that we opened, and we put our semicolon. Okay, and so what matf.abs does is it's saying it's doing a mat function, and abs is for absolute, and what we're doing is getting an absolute value. So what this does is, if this is -5, it'll return it as 5. It just turns any minus number into a positive number. That's basically the simple version of what it does. It's very straightforward, and it's a very handy and useful thing to use within Unity. It's just it's a nice one to try and remember because it can come up and kind of save you in lots of situations. So we just want to say matf.abs, and we want to say myRigidBody.velocity.x. So now we know that we're sending out to our speed float here the right value. So we also want to send out a value for our grounded, and this one is a little bit more straightforward because we can just say myanim dot, this time we want to set a bool, so set bool, and then we open our bracket. Again, we have to type in the name of the value that we want to make changes to, which is our grounded one here. And it's always important to make sure that we keep the capitalization of the letters the exact same, and the spelling the exact same. It has to be the exact same as it is down here. If we were to use a small g here, for example, we're talking about something completely different then, and it doesn't know where to set this bool value. So we want to make sure it's a capital G like that. And then again, we want to put a comma, and this time we don't need to make any changes to the value that we're sending in. We're just sending in, this is grounded boolean here, just straight as it is. So we just need to type in is grounded, and then close that bracket and hit our semicolon again to end the line. So now we can just save that, and we can pop back in here, and when this compiles down in the corner, what we should see is, well, we shouldn't see anything actually, but what we can do is, if we keep our animator window open here, when we start moving in the game, we should see our animations take place, but we'll also see our speed value changing here, and grounded ticking and unticking depending whether we're on the ground. So let's hit play here now, and hopefully, if we're doing everything properly, everything should be working just fine. Okay, so now we can see we've got our grounded turned on, our player idle here. We see this bar repeatedly playing like this basically means that this is the active component at the moment. So if we start walking, we can see it switches to being just like that. And if we jump now, we can jump in the air, and we see our animation turns to the jumping animation. We see everything is working just the way we want to, and grounded is turning off. We see our speed changing as we're moving, and like I said, whether we're moving left or right, we see speed is always 5. So we know it's a positive value, so we know we're doing everything just the way we want to. The only thing that's kind of looking a little bit weird at the moment is that our player, no matter whether we're moving left or right, he's facing the same direction. And that kind of looks a little bit weird and strange. So what we want to do is, we want to be able to flip the player around when he's facing a different direction. So that's what we're going to do next.